They said her heart would keep beating somewhere else, that it would live on in another chest, another rhythm, another life. But no one told me it would come back to me. It's been a year since. Mira told me to forget her, the night before her surgery. She was calm when she said it, her voice trembling just enough to break me. You'll move on, Jiho. You have to. I didn't. I couldn't. I stayed haunted by her laughter. Her paint-stained fingers, the way she used to hum when it rained. And when I finally agreed to donate my heart, or at least a piece of it, to medical research after my accident. I never thought it would mean anything. Until today, a letter arrived at my door. The hospital seal. A formal apology. Inside, an envelope marked Donor A for recipient 117. I opened it, and the handwriting stopped my breath. If you're reading this, it means my heart has found you. Myra, her name. Her words. And my name written beneath hers. The woman I loved had told me to forget her. But she had written to the man who would receive her heart. My hands trembled. Somewhere deep in my chest, something shifted. A pulse, a memory, a second chance. And the cruel, beautiful irony of fate whispered, her heart never left you. The first time I saw Mira, it was raining, the kind of rain that blurred the world into watercolors. The city lights bled into the puddles, neon veins spreading through the pavement. And there she was, in the middle of it all, sketching on a soaked canvas, as if the storm itself had chosen her as its muse. Her hair clung to her face, dark strands tracing the curve of her jaw. The paper she held was half dissolved, the pencil marks running like tears, yet she didn't seem to care. I watched her for a moment too long, long enough for her to notice. She smiled. Not shyly, not nervously, but like she had known I would stop, like she'd been waiting. When I finally approached, I held out my umbrella. She shook her head. Rain adds truth to everything, she said, voice soft but certain. I remember the sound of those words more than the words themselves, the calm certainty in them. I was an engineer. I believed in control, in straight lines, in things that made sense. She was chaos in human form, and somehow I wanted to understand her. The rain thickened. She finally gave in and stepped under my umbrella, her shoulder brushing mine. The touch was brief, accidental, yet my heartbeat stuttered like it had been rewired. We found refuge in a small cafe nearby, the kind of place where the lights flicker and time slows. Steam fogged the windows, and her laugh, light and unfiltered, filled the space between us. I paint hearts, she said between sips of coffee. Not the cute kind, the real kind. The ones that beat, bruise, and break. They tell stories no face can. I didn't know how to answer that, so I just nodded, pretending to understand. But I didn't. Not yet. She leaned forward, eyes reflecting the amber glow of the street outside. You look like someone who's forgotten how to feel, she said. It wasn't a question. And for some reason, I didn't deny it. Something about her made it impossible to lie. She saw through people, or maybe she saw into them. It was terrifying and addicting. When we stepped back into the night, the rain had softened to a drizzle. She pulled a small sketch pad from her bag. Don't move, she said. I stood there, uncertain, watching her hand move fast and sure, eyes darting between me and the page. Minutes passed. Then she tore the page out, pressed it into my hand, and said quietly, every heart leaves a pattern. Yours feels like home. It wasn't a portrait. It was a tangle of soft, trembling lines, almost abstract, but somehow alive. A heartbeat made visible. My heartbeat. Before I could say anything, she turned and walked away, no goodbye. No glance back, only the faint shimmer of streetlight reflecting off her wet hair. I stared after her until she vanished into the crowd. The sketch in my hand was already warping from the rain, the ink bleeding outward like veins. Still, I couldn't throw it away. That night, I pinned it above my desk. And every time I looked at it, I felt something I hadn't felt in years, a flicker of warmth beneath the ribs. As if someone had reached inside and lit a candle where it had long gone dark. Weeks passed. We met again by accident, though deep down I knew it wasn't. Fate doesn't make mistakes that deliberate. She said she'd been looking for the heartbeat boy. I said I'd been. Looking for color? She smiled like she understood. Exactly what that meant. I didn't know then. That she was painting with borrowed time. That behind her laughter was a failing rhythm, hidden beneath layers of art and denial. That her fascination with hearts wasn't metaphorical, it was survival. But that night, as rain began to fall again, and she slipped her hand into mine without asking, I didn't need to know. All I knew was that something inside me had shifted. The world no longer sounded like machinery and logic. It pulsed. And though I didn't realize it then, the heart she would later give away had already begun to beat inside me. Myra became my every morning. Even when mornings felt meaningless. The first time she invited me to her studio, I didn't know what to expect. I imagined paint-splattered chaos, walls crowded with unfinished work, the smell of turpentine thick in the air. Instead, I found a room bathed in soft sunlight. Canvases stacked neatly against the walls, and her humming low melodic. Like she was keeping a secret from the world. She offered me coffee in a chipped ceramic mug, and I took it with hands that shook slightly. I didn't tell her. My hands always shook around her. I didn't want her to see how badly I wanted to stay. We spent hours in silence at first. She painted. I watched. The brush in her hand moved like it belonged to her, alone, delicate, unrestrained, alive. I tried to sketch 2 clumsy lines that looked like they had no meaning, but she didn't laugh. She tilted her head, squinted at my paper, and said softly, "Even mistakes leave traces. That's how hearts remember." Her words sank in deeper than I wanted to admit, and when she touched my arm to adjust my posture, I felt an electric pulse that had nothing to do with the room's sunlight. Days turned into weeks, and we settled into quiet routines. Morning coffee, afternoon painting sessions, nights wandering under neon signs, the city reflecting like shattered glass around us. She talked about hearts again, always hearts, how they weren't perfect, how they could be heavy, light, broken, whole. She said they left a pattern in everyone they touched. Invisible but undeniable. One evening, I asked her why she painted hearts so obsessively. She didn't answer immediately. She stared at the rain streaking the window. Finally, she whispered, "Because they're the only parts of us that are truly alive." Faces fade. Hands age. Hearts. They leave a story behind. I wanted to argue, to tell her that life wasn't so poetic, that people didn't leave stories, only memories that fade. But I didn't. Her words carried a truth that cut sharper than any logic. I had. She began to share little pieces of herself. Notes in my coat pocket. Sketches hidden in my bag. Quiet confessions at night. I shared nothing back at first. I was afraid of how much I would belong if I did. But slowly, the walls I'd built started to crumble. I noticed how she flinched sometimes, clutching her chest, like the slightest movement hurt. She never admitted it, never let me see her vulnerability fully. I told myself it was stress, fatigue, something minor. I didn't know then that her heart was already betraying her, a rhythm failing quietly beneath the surface. One night she drew me. Not my face, not a figure, but the way she felt my heartbeat. Lines trembled, overlapping, forming something almost alive on the page. She pressed it into my hands and said, "This is how you feel to me. Every heartbeat leaves a mark. Yours. Feels like home." I couldn't speak. My chest ached, not from the painting, not from love, from recognition. From the first moment she reached into my grayscale world and painted it with color I didn't know I had. Weeks later, she whispered while we walked in the rain, "Don't be afraid of feeling too much. Hearts are strong, even when they break." Her presence was intoxicating, overwhelming. I was addicted to the way she saw life in the spaces between lines, in the pauses between words, in the storms that made the world tremble. And yet, beneath all the laughter, the humming, the art, I sensed a fragility she refused to name. I didn't ask. I couldn't. I was too busy learning to live in her orbit, to survive on her laughter, to trace her hands with mine and pretend the world outside her studio didn't exist. Some nights, I would lie awake, staring at the ceiling, trying to hear her heartbeat in the dark. I didn't know then that her obsession with hearts wasn't just poetic, it was literal. Her life, her love, her story, it was fragile. Every brushstroke, every smile, every heartbeat she shared with me was borrowed time. And I loved her all the more for it, because even if the world outside was temporary, inside that studio, in the hush between brush and canvas, we were infinite. The night before her surgery, Mira asked to see the ocean. She didn't tell me why, only that she needed to feel the waves, the salt, the horizon stretching farther than the city could reach. I didn't question it. How could I? She spoke with a calm certainty I had learned to trust. We drove in silence, the kind of silence that doesn't need words. The rain had stopped, leaving the world glistening and wet, each streetlight reflecting on puddles like scattered stars. Her hand brushed mine on the gear shift, accidental or not. Ow. And I felt it all over again. The electricity, the quiet ache of belonging. When we reached the shore, the ocean was dark, vast, almost endless. The waves crashed with a rhythm that made my chest hurt in ways I didn't want to understand. She stood at the edge of the water, hair whipping in the wind, eyes fixed on the horizon. She looked so small, so fragile against the enormity of the sea. "Promise me one thing," she said suddenly, voice low, almost swallowed by the wind. I turned to her, the salt and damp temps of the ocean filling my nose. "Anything," I said, my voice shaking before I could stop it. "Promise me, if something happens, forget me." The words hit me like the waves themselves, relentless, impossible to resist. I wanted to shake her, to beg her not to say them, to erase the thought that anything could take her from me. But her gaze was steady, unwavering, and I saw then that she had already accepted it. I grabbed her hands in mine, desperate. "Don't say that. Don't ask me to forget you," she smiled, a small, sad curve of her lips. "Hearts can't be owned, Jiho. They just pass through people. Yours is too alive to be mine forever." I felt tears sting my eyes, the wind carrying them into the night. I wanted to scream that I didn't care about time or ownership, that I'd hold her anyway. But I stayed silent, pressed my forehead against hers, memorizing the warmth. The scent of rain-soaked hair, the soft tremble of her breath. We walked along the shore until the waves licked at our shoes. She hummed a song she had made up, and I wanted to trap that sound in a jar, never let it escape. Every step we took felt like walking on borrowed time. Every heartbeat a fragile promise. When it was time to leave, she didn't look back. She got into the car without a word, her silhouette swallowed by the dark. I wanted to follow her, to beg the universe for more minutes, more hours, more days. But I didn't. I let the engine roar away, carrying her and my hope in the same breath. Hours later, I sat in the hospital waiting room, staring at the fluorescent lights, pretending they were stars I could navigate by. The news came like a thunderclap. She didn't make it. I remember collapsing in the hallway, my body pressed to the cold tiles. Her painting, What I Can't Keep, had slipped from my bag and landed in a puddle of rainwater tracked in from outside. Ink bled, paper warped, but I couldn't throw it away. It was all I had left of her. I wanted to scream, to break everything, to erase the world for daring to exist without her in it. But I stayed there alone, clutching the ruined painting. Letting my tears mix with the rain and the water on the floor, I buried that painting in her garden later, pressing it into the soil like a letter to the dead. And as I shoveled earth over it, I realized something cruelly true. I hadn't just buried a canvas. I had buried myself. And yet even in that darkness, even in that grief that seemed endless, I felt the faintest pulse of something I couldn't name, a whisper that she had left me more than memories, a trace of color in my gray world. Because even in her absence, she had made a mark, one that would not fade. A year passed, and the world grew quiet around me, though I never did. I moved through my days like a ghost in my own life, waking, working, sleeping, each moment gray and hollow. The laughter and color Mira had brought into my world had faded into shadows, leaving only echoes of what could have been. Then, one afternoon, it arrived. The envelope was unremarkable at first glance. Plain, hospital issued, stamped with my name. I hesitated, fingertips brushing the seal as though the paper itself might shatter under my touch. Inside, a formal notice about donor records. I frowned. Confusion prickled along my spine. My eyes flicked over the first few lines, dry and bureaucratic. Then I found it, a smaller envelope slipped between the documents, handwriting unmistakable. Her handwriting. Myra's. To my heart's next home. I froze. My chest tightened. The room seemed to tilt, the walls bending inward. I had read her letters before, tucked away, faded and fragile. But this one? This one pulsed with something alive, as if the paper itself carried her heartbeat. I opened it slowly, reverently. If you're reading this, please take care of it. It beats too fast when it loves, too slow when it hurts. Tell him I wanted to stay, but I couldn't. My fingers shook. My pulse raced. I read it again. And then, beneath the closing, in the same flowing script, recipient Jiho Han. I read my name, written in her hand, over and over, until it blurred into everything I had lost. Her heart. She hadn't just written to someone, she had written to me. To the man who had loved her beyond reason, who had watched her slip into hospitals and surgeries without complaint. To me, her heart had meant more than survival. It had meant continuity, a trace of her in the world she would leave behind. I sank into the nearest chair, the letter trembling in my hands like it had a life of its own. I pressed it to my chest. The paper felt impossibly warm. I wanted to hear her voice, to feel her pulse, to tell her I hadn't forgotten. Tears blurred my vision. The irony was unbearable. She had told me to forget her. She had whispered it like a spell I was meant to obey. But in the quiet bureaucracy of hospitals and forms, in the ink of a letter I hadn't been meant to find, she had ensured I could not. I went to her studio that night, the envelope clutched like a talisman. The smell of old paint and turpentine hit me the moment I opened the door. Dust danced in the fading light, hovering over canvases that had never been touched since her death, and there, hidden behind the final painting she had done, what I can't keep another envelope, my name again. If this finds you, Jiho, it means I'm gone. But I wanted you to know, my art teacher once said, we leave pieces of ourselves in those we love. So maybe, even if I'm gone, you'll find me in your chest. Or your dreams. I pressed the paper to my lips. My hands shook violently, and my knees buckled. The truth hit me like a wave stronger than the ocean we had once walked beside. Mira had intended to reach me. To touch me again, even after she was gone. I sank to the floor. Surrounded by her unfinished paintings, her letters, her ghosts, and for the first time since she left, I felt a pulse, faint, distant, out, but unmistakably alive. It was not my pulse alone. It was hers, or a memory of hers, flowing through me like a river that refused to die. Somewhere deep inside my chest, I realized the cruelest, most beautiful truth. She had told me to forget her, and yet she had written me into her afterlife. And in that irony, in that impossible, agonizing love, I found the faintest spark of hope. That perhaps I was not merely mourning her anymore. Perhaps I was beginning to carry her alive, beating indelibly inside myself. The letter trembled in my hands. I traced her words again and again until the edges of the paper softened against my skin, and whispered into the quiet studio where no one would answer, I will take care of it. I will carry you, Mira. I promise. I couldn't sleep that night. The letter from Mira lay on my desk, unfolded, fragile, her handwriting almost glowing in the dim lamplight. Read it over and over, the words sinking into me like water into dry earth. Her heart, her pulse, her existence, all folded neatly into paper and ink sent to me after she was gone. But I had a nagging feeling, a whisper at the edge of my mind that there was more. I returned to her studio, the place I had avoided for months, too heavy with grief to enter. Dust motes floated in the air, suspended like frozen rain. The smell of turpentine and old paint hit me immediately, familiar, haunting, alive. Her canvases stood like sentinels against the walls, some finished, some abandoned mid-stroke. Then I saw it. A small, yellowed envelope tucked behind the final canvas, the one titled, What I Can't Keep. my name scrawled across it in her unmistakable handwriting. My hands shook as I picked it up. Every instinct screamed that opening it would hurt more than I could bear. And yet I couldn't stop myself. Inside was another letter. Longer, more intimate than the first. Her words swirled with fear, love, and a quiet acceptance of death. Jiho, if this finds you, it means I am no longer in this world, but I want you to understand. I wanted to stay. To grow old with you, to see our hearts beat together until the end. But fate had a different rhythm for me. I leave my heart with you, in letters, in art, in memory. If life ever gives you another chance, you will know it was meant to be. The tears came fast and hard. I pressed the envelope to my chest, and I could almost feel her heartbeat, faint but insistent, a pulse that was hers, yet mine. Her obsession with hearts had never been metaphorical. I finally understood she had known her time was limited. She had anticipated the end, yet she had written, painted, hidden pieces of herself in the world in me. Her final act of love was not just her life, but her careful orchestration to reach me after death. I sank to the floor, surrounded by her art, her letters, her absence made vivid by her presence. And then I noticed something subtle. A new sketch tucked beneath her desk. One I had never seen. A heart split in two. Yeah. One half dark, one half golden. Beneath it, a single line. He'll know when it's time. Time. I realized then that her heart had been preparing me all along, for grief, for survival, for life after loss. She had left a path through the pain, a quiet guidance, a pulse that would carry me forward. I held the letters close and whispered into the silent studio. I don't understand how you planned all of this, Myra. How you could think of me even when you were leaving me behind. I could almost hear her laughter in the corners of the room, soft and teasing, light as wind through the curtains. A ghost of her presence wrapped around me. Filling the empty space, I realized then that I wasn't merely mourning her anymore. I was discovering her, finding her hidden in words, in sketches, in the pulse of my own chest. Our love had become a living thing. I spread her letters on the floor, one after another, tracing the ink with my fingertips, memorizing the spaces she had left for me to fill. Her final message wasn't despair. It was a bridge. And somewhere deep inside me, beneath grief, beneath loss, I felt it, the first spark of hope. The knowledge that Mira had left me more than memories. She had left me herself, breathing in words, pulsing in sketches. Alive in ways the world could not erase. I leaned back against the wall, clutching the letters, and I whispered into the quiet studio where no one would hear but the ghosts of paint and rain. I will find you in all of this, Mira. I will carry you with me always. For the first time, I didn't feel broken. I felt chosen. Her love had survived her. And somehow, impossibly, it had returned to me. Asterisk, the first time I picked up a brush after Mira's death. My hands felt foreign, clumsy, as if they belonged to someone else entirely. Her letters lay spread across the floor. A quiet chorus of her heartbeat whispering at me, guiding me to start again. I had avoided the studio for months, terrified that entering her space would collapse me entirely. But that morning, sunlight poured through the dusty windows, illuminating the streaks of her paint still clinging to the walls. It smelled like her faint turpentine rain, and the faint temps of tears she had cried into her sketches. I chose a blank canvas, afraid, hesitant. The brush hovered above it, trembling, and then I let it fall. Color erupted. Chaotic, uncontrolled, a mixture of grief and longing, anger and love. Then something shifted. The chaos became rhythm. The colors became a language I understood without knowing how. Hours passed like minutes. I painted her letters, her sketches, her heartbeat into each stroke. I painted the ocean where we had walked, the rain that had introduced us, the way her smile had broken my gray world into pieces of gold. The first piece I completed, I titled Mira's Pulse. It was abstract, fractured, yet alive lines of crimson and gold weaving across the canvas like veins of fire. Oh, when I stepped back, I could almost feel her presence beside me, humming softly as she had when she worked, watching me, approving. Word of my gallery show spread quietly at first. Friends, strangers, people who had lost or loved or remembered, they came. They stood before the canvases, sometimes weeping, sometimes smiling. I watched them. I realized then that Mira's heart was no longer confined to memory. It was alive in the people who paused to feel it. One night, a young woman approached me after the exhibit had closed. Her eyes were bright, wet with tears. I had a transplant last year, she said, voice trembling. One of Myra's anonymous donor letters inspired me to live again. I didn't know whose heart it was until now, but I feel it every day. I held her hands in mine, suddenly understanding. Mira had wanted her heart, her life, her art to reach beyond me, beyond our love, to touch others, survive in the world she could no longer walk. Her legacy pulsed through me and through everyone who encountered it. I realized that revival isn't always about reclaiming what's lost. Sometimes it's about letting it spread, letting it become something greater. I began to sign my work with both our names, Jiho and Mirahan. I didn't care if people asked questions. I didn't care about explanations. It was no longer just mine. It was ours. I painted her final sketches onto larger canvases. Her letters projected in abstract brushstrokes, her heartbeat made visible in lines of gold and crimson. And with each stroke, the grief that had weighed me down for a year became something else. Energy, movement, life. Sometimes, late at night, I would pause and listen. The faint rhythm beneath my ribs would match the pulse of her sketches, the cadence of her letters. I would close my eyes and feel her beside me, not as memory, not as ghost, but as a living presence. I learned that love can survive absence, that grief can be transformed into creation, that a heart given freely, even after death, has a way of teaching the living how to continue. And I realized something quietly beautiful. She had chosen me not to keep her, but to carry her forward, to let her love expand, even after she was gone. When the gallery lights dimmed one evening, I stood alone, surrounded by her colors, her pulse in every line. I whispered to the empty room, to the echoes, to the memory of her voice, "You are alive, Mira. You are everywhere. And I will make sure the world knows it." For the first time, I didn't feel broken. I felt whole. I felt her heart, her true radiant heart, beating inside me. I returned to the ocean. The same shore where Mira and I had walked the night before her surgery, the night she told me to forget her. The waves were gentle now, lapping at the sand like whispers, carrying the memory of her laughter in every crest. The salt air clung to my skin, and the horizon stretched farther than I could see. Endless and infinite, like the space she had left inside me. I carried her letters with me. The fragile papers folded and worn from months of tracing her handwriting over and over. I sat on the damp sand, legs pulled to my chest, and read aloud. Her words spilled into the wind, raw and intimate. "Jiho, if you are reading this, my heart is already yours. Remember me in the rhythm of your own pulse?" I closed my eyes and whispered back into the ocean, letting my voice carry with the waves. "I never forgot you. Myra, I never could." The confession was heavy yet liberating. For the first time, I spoke to her as if she were beside me, and I allowed my grief to bend into something gentler. Not sorrowless grief had no place for that, but transformable. I remembered the warmth of her hand in mine, the way her laughter would tangle with mine, the brushstrokes she had left in my world. I imagined her there on the sand beside me, hair wet from the rain, eyes bright, smiling softly at how stubborn I had always been. I told her all the things I had never said, my fear of losing her, my gratitude for having known her, and the way my world had changed because of her. "I carry you with me," I whispered. "Not in memory alone, in my heartbeat, in my art. In everything I do." A gull cried overhead, and the wind shifted, carrying the words away. For a moment, the universe seemed to lean in, listening. I felt her answer not in sound, but in the quiet hum beneath my ribs, the echo of her pulse mingling with mine. The confessions poured out of me like the tide, unstoppable, cleansing, vital. I admitted that I had been lost without her, but now I was beginning to find myself again, not despite her absence, but because of her presence that lingered, insistent. Immortal, I thought of the people her art had touched, the lives she had inspired even after death. Her heart, literal and metaphorical, had become a beacon. And I, her chosen recipient, her keeper, had a responsibility to let it live, not only in my chest but in the world. I traced her name in the sand with a trembling finger. Mira, I whispered it, over and over, until the wind carried it into the horizon, scattering it across waves and sky, and then I made a silent promise I would continue. I would love in the way she had taught me, fully and without hesitation. I would create, breathe, and feel. I would let her presence guide me, not haunt me. For the first time, I felt free. Free to carry her without being chained by grief. Free to embrace her legacy in every choice I made. Free to be alive. A single ray of sunlight broke through the clouds, illuminating the ocean in gold. It struck the water, scattering light in dancing fragments, like the pulse of a heart made visible. And I swear I could feel hers. Soft, steady, eternal. I smiled, tears running down my face, letting the confession reach the sky, the sea, and the world beyond. I will carry you, Mira, always, and I will live the way you wanted me to. Somewhere I knew she laughed, gentle, teasing light, and I whispered back into the wind, "You're alive, Mira, in me." In all of this, the waves lapped closer to my feet, the sand shifting beneath me. And I felt a truth I had waited for all year. Love never truly leaves. It transforms. It survives. It becomes everything you need it to be. And in that realization, I finally let myself breathe. Asterisk, years later, I opened my gallery to the public for the first time in a long time. The exhibit was called Letters from the Heart. It was both mine and hers. Every canvas. Every line, every brushstroke, a collaboration across life and death. Memory and pulse. Visitors came quietly, reverently, as though entering a sacred space. Some wept, some whispered, some simply stared, mesmerized by the living rhythm of our love captured on canvas. I watched them from the doorway, my chest swelling with a mixture of pride and longing. Mira's heartbeat was here. Not literally, but in every color, every curve, every trembling line. The first piece they saw was Mira's pulse. Us. The abstract heart I had painted in the days following her letters. Red and gold veins intertwined, spreading across the canvas like life itself. A young woman reached forward, brushing her fingertips across the paint without touching it, tears glinting in her eyes. She saved me, she whispered, voice trembling. Even after she was gone, I realized then that this gallery wasn't just mine. It was hers, her heartbeat, her love, her lessons spreading quietly into the world. And somehow, she had chosen me to carry it all forward. The last piece in the gallery, displayed under soft light, was her letter to me framed beneath glass. If you're reading this, my heart has found you. Her handwriting danced across the page like the pulse of a living thing. I added one final line below it. In my own hand, it never left. It was simple, true, eternal. People came and they lingered. Some would kneel, some would bow their heads. Some would leave notes of their own. Gratitude, sorrow, love, memories of hearts lost or saved. Myra's legacy was no longer confined to my grief. It had become a living, breathing entity, touching strangers in ways I had never imagined. I wandered through the gallery alone after hours, letting the silence of the space envelop me. Her letters, her sketches, the abstracts of our combined hearts, all pulsed in rhythm with my own heartbeat. And I spoke to her aloud, as though she could hear me. You did this, Myra. You survived in every brushstroke. In every heart that comes here, you live. I could almost hear her laughing, soft and teasing, somewhere in the light and shadow of the room. I could feel her pulse in my chest, steady, insistent, eternal. It was poetic justice. Her absence had once left me broken, lost, hollow. But her legacy, her art, her letters, they had returned to me multiplied, reaching further than her body ever could. I thought of the first day we met in the rain, the first sketch she pressed into my hands, the first time she told me to forget her. and I smiled, remembering how stubborn I had been, how impossible it had been to obey. She had never truly wanted to leave me. She had only wanted to teach me how to carry her, somewhere deep inside me. I realized that this was the only immortality worth having, to live in someone's pulse, to survive in someone's art, to love beyond presence, beyond death. I walked to the center of the gallery and looked at all the pieces. They told her story, our story, the story of hearts that break and heal, hearts that leave traces, hearts that live on. And in that moment, I felt her hand in mine, not warm, not soft, but alive in memory, alive in creation, alive in legacy. I whispered into the quiet room, into the echoes of paint and paper and pulse. Thank you, Mira, for everything, for every heartbeat, every word, every brushstroke. I will carry you forever. The gallery lights dimmed softly. Outside, the city moved on, indifferent. Inside, though, her love was eternal. And I knew, finally, that I was no longer carrying grief. I was carrying her life, her pulse, her legacy. Her heart had returned to the world. And through me, it would never leave.